Hello, hello, Duck fans. Welcome in after an exciting victory with the absolute drubbing of Colorado. This is the Oregon Ducks postgame live brought to you by the voice of college football. As always, I'm Derek, and this is my guy Spaz. So Spaz, we're going to jump right into it today. I just want some initial postgame reactions. How you feeling coming off a massive victory over a majorly overhyped Colorado team?
Just got one thing to say. Overrated. Overrated. That was just a beautiful sound to hear out of 68,000 Duck fans in Autzen Stadium mid-third quarter. Overrated. We put the ass whooping of ass whoopings on prime time. The prime is done. It's primed.
So what you're saying is the hype train has finally left the station? Are we done with the Colorado hype train?
God, I hope so. After next weekend, it's going to be worse because they got to go home after this and they got to play USC next week. I'm sorry. They're going to get storm-rolled.
Absolutely. And that's kind of something I was thinking about watching this game too. You're telling me you go from playing Bo Nix in Eugene one weekend to the reigning Heisman Trophy winner and Caleb Williams the next week? Man, that's a daunting task for any team, let alone a team coming off a massive letdown on the road. But yeah, overall, it was a fantastic game. I thought the fast start was essential to kind of getting this game going. Oregon came out, opening drive touchdown, Colorado went 3-and-out. Oregon touchdown, Colorado went 6-and-out. So, it's the Ducks, they started fast and they kept pushing through all the way through halftime. It was really fun to watch that offense on display today.
Yeah, the first half was great. It was just super fun. I am trying to find my other link here.
Absolutely. Well, in the first half, I don't think, just watching that game, I don't think Colorado had an answer for anything Oregon was doing. Oregon was absolutely running the ball at will, averaging about almost 10 yards a carry in that first half combined. That is an absolute recipe for disaster. Obviously that affects the tempo. Oregon controlled the pace of the game like they wanted to, and like I said, they absolutely scored at will in that first half. So that was massive. The run game did exactly what we thought the run game was going to do. Bucky, he was 10 for 89, averaging 8.9 yards a carry. JJ, he was 7 for 54, 7.7 yards a carry, and Noah, 8 for 45 for 5.6 yards a carry. So all three of our backs were beyond effective today against a not so stout Colorado run defense.
No, it was definitely not a pretty sight for Colorado.
No, it wasn't. I think Oregon came in and, we talked about this earlier in the week, how Colorado's run defense was highly suspect, and we had a deep hunch that Dan Lanning and, the Wilstein offense were going to run the ball down their throats. And I think that's exactly what we saw. I know they mentioned it on the live cast a couple times that Colorado was stacking the box. They'd have 6-7 guys deep in the box and it would not matter. They would still be gashed. So that was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
What do we got here? How much pain will Lanning put on the third string defense for allowing a score? It's kind of funny you bring that up. That's something Spaz and I were talking about right before we jumped on the stream today. We really wanted that shutout. There is nothing more as an Oregon fan. It's somebody who was watching this Colorado hype train run rampant all week in the national media. Everywhere you looked, it wasn't the Oregon-Colorado game. It was the Colorado game. It was. I really wish we could have seen that shutout. And with that being said, though, we had our threes in for the most part, 2s and 3s, and Brado decided to keep their 1s in there to get on the board. So, to be honest, that was kind of funny. We absolutely love to see that. And then today, obviously, Bo was 100% Bo. Bo was 28 for 33, 276, 4 total touchdowns. Did have an interception, I know we talked about that a little bit. Spaz, you kind of mentioned how there was a little miscommunication there. Troy was cutting back. And, if he took it over the top, that was probably a walk-in score.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he would have. Oh, you piece of crap. I'm trying to get stuff over to our other stinking pages.
Oh, absolutely, no problem.
Oh, here's this guy late to the ball game.
And here we go, man. You would.
I told y'all I'd be here, all right? I may have missed a couple weeks, but I'm here.
We were just kind of going over post-game reactions. Obviously with a major win over a Colorado team that had a lot of hype coming in. How you feeling, Sean, after that big dub today?
Obviously, I'm happy. I was just got out of Wingstop talking with a guy. I feel like we definitely took that pedal off the gas offensively after that first half. Sure, I would have liked to have that pedal a lot more on there, but at the same time, there's not much we can really do about that when Stein's calling a great game, period, and just running that offense like it's a top 5 team.
Yeah, and it kind of looked like it too. Overall in all phases of the game, we talked about earlier how the defense was obviously going to be a major factor coming into this game. Just with the question marks in our secondary and, kind of how Texas Tech ran at will over our defense in week 2. But I think we saw absolutely major strides from our defense this week. How about you?
Yeah, for sure. Defensively, I definitely think that was a whole lot better this week, and I feel like they were definitely a lot more motivated just based on everything that's been said, wanting to be the team that actually derailed prime time, as they were saying. And even so, I don't even feel like if Travis Hunter was in there for the game, I feel like Travis Hunter would have kind of been null and void, especially with how Kyrene, I forget his first name, especially with how he was playing. I feel like he would have definitely just shut Hunter down at that point for their offense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of an interesting point. And I know it's kind of something we were talking about earlier, how the narrative is kind of, this game could have been different with Travis Hunter, arguably their best player on both sides of the ball. But, I personally don't think that's a very good argument. One player is not going to account for 35 points. The game might have been closer, and sure, it might have been a little more interesting. Colorado definitely was missing a major piece, so, don't get that wrong. But the Travis Hunter effect, I think Dan Lanning and company came out there and absolutely showed without a doubt who the better team was today.
I definitely feel like that was his goal too, was, he, like he said, we're not playing in Hollywood, like we're playing on the grass. They're looking for clicks, we're looking for wins. Yes, Prime was going to come in, he was going to have some wins.
Mm-hmm.
TCU wasn't the same team. We all know that. But at the same time, it's like then you play Colorado State, who you had to beat in double overtime. And then you played Nebraska.
Did you guys see the halftime post of one Mr. Travis Hunter?
Where he was streaming 2K or something? Yeah, I saw that. That's definitely
nothing. And he's streaming 2K, NBA 2K on his Twitter, on his Twitch.
Well, man, he didn't want to watch the ass beating either. It probably hurt his ego a little bit to watch his team go out there and get thrumped on national TV.
Well, because every week he goes on Bleacher Report and they ask him to list his top 5 schools. Colorado's number 1. Like, I get you play for that team, but you come out and you play a real team. You're not playing these 95% different team of TCU, a Nebraska team that hasn't been good for years, a Colorado State team that literally Travis Hunter was locked down.
Yeah.
Wasn't really doing much.
Absolutely.
And then
in hindsight,
Like, you come out and you play the cream of the crop of the Pac-12, essentially, like, for the next 2 weeks, like, you're going to get your ass beat.
And like you said, TCU is not the same TCU team. You know, they lost a lot of their talent, their starting talent. Don't get me wrong. They definitely had some of the same pieces, but they are not the same team. Nebraska, they're going to finish in the bottom half of the Big Ten, and Colorado State was a winless Mountain West team at that time. So, you know, when we're really looking at
the Texas Tech game does not look very big on us now neither, because they just got beat by West Virginia today.
They did. They also lost their starting quarterback in the first quarter. You know, that has a little bit to do with it. But actually, yeah, that's
what happened with Tyler.
I saw he had a leg injury that he was carted off the field, and they didn't think it looked very good. So I'm going to guess it's a pretty substantial injury. Yeah. So, you know, prayers up to Tyler Shuck. I hope he's able to recover.
Now, I will say about Whittington, they did say that, yes, he was carted to the locker room. The difference was that he was carted with his legs hanging over the side and whatnot. They didn't have him laying down or anything. So they didn't think it was super serious, but didn't hear now. I listened to the whole Duck post game on the audio on their football channel, and they didn't bring up anything about any major injuries. So we'll see Monday, Tuesday, what happens.
With Whittington too, if that was broken, you see it. If it's an ankle broken, they're going to have that leg on the side, like, laid out, so it's probably more or less an ankle sprain. Because I mean, go back and look at that replay with him, and it just looked like the dude rolled on his ankle. It didn't landed on his ankle. Yeah, it didn't seem like, okay, it's broken, because he was gimping, but it wasn't necessarily like, okay, I can't, like, it's broken, I can't put any pressure on it, because it looked like he was at least putting a little bit of pressure on it to that point that that it looked like it may just be a really bad sprain.
Oh, I did not hear that.
You see, also, yeah, I also did not hear that.
I didn't hear that.
Yeah, Rated Dave says that Whittington will be out a couple weeks per Dan Lanning, and I would say that's pretty consistent with a high ankle sprain. It's kind of what it looked like on the field. And then I did see a sideline report that says the first thing they did was took off that sock and shoe to get him back to the locker room. So that probably tells me we're looking at more of a sprain, you know, some sort of some sort of minor ligament issue as opposed to a break or, you know, something worse even. So that is good. Oregon was able to walk away from this game healthy overall. You know, obviously Noah Whittington, that he's a key piece of our lineup here. It does help. Next week we have Stanford, and then the following week we have our bye week already going into Washington. So we do have a couple weeks to get some of our guys.
Theoretically, he don't have to play for 3 weeks, so he's good.
Right.
He should be fine.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be 2 weeks because we'll probably want him for Washington. But at the same time, like I was texting y'all, like, our running back room is so deep that even if we lose Whittington for a few weeks, it's not like it's going to hurt us that much. Like, you can bring in, you got Bucky, who's obviously starting, but you can bring in Jordan James, and he showed that he'd be capable of taking over that RB2 kind of slot for a few weeks.
Jordan James has showed well that he can handle the rock. Yeah. So, yeah, we're definitely uber deep there.
Yeah, I mean, to be real honest, that's kind of why I don't have a panic about Noah Whittington. Absolutely, you know, he is a key piece, and he's explosive. Obviously, one of our fastest backs we have. But the continued emergence of Jordan James, I think, is going to be what keeps everybody saying, you know, the run game, in my opinion, is not going to regress. I think, you know, we're going to see Bucky keep being Bucky. They couldn't bring that man down tonight. I think he was averaging about 1.3 broken tackles per rush. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive that, you know, initial contact is not enough to bring our man Bucky down. He looked like a man among boys in that first half, especially.
1 minute into the second quarter, Georgia 7, UAB 7.
You know, I'm going to take that for what it's worth. And I think this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, this Oregon at like Texas Tech. We're going to see teams struggle. You know what I'm saying? Don't get me wrong. Texas Tech and UAB, they're not the cream of the crop by any stretch. But I think what we do know, just being football fans over many, many years, is we do see teams struggle. And it's not uncommon to see teams struggle with lesser opponents. You say you play down to your opponent, and I think that's probably what we're seeing with Georgia. With that being said, I think they have a quarterback problem. That's a whole different issue. Tune into the Georgia show, and I'm sure that'll be a topic of discussion post-game tonight.
The two top SEC teams have quarterback problems, but that's a different story.
Speaking of quarterback play, I think one of the major things I was hearing this week, and especially I don't know if you guys are familiar with many of the shows on like FS1, Fox Sports 1 during the week. They covered a lot of Colorado this week, absolutely shocking. But one thing I heard this week that really got under my skin personally. And, I know the media is just running wild with the Colorado hype train, but I heard the quote, Shedeur Sanders is a league above Bo Nix. That was one quote. The next quote, Shedeur Sanders is going to show Caleb Williams the following week why he should be the number 1 pick. Now, I'm going to be nice here. Colorado's offensive line is dog shit. They were bad. They were extremely porous. It looked like a high school O-line playing, a D1 program's O-line. It was bad. And, I don't expect any quarterback. I wouldn't expect Bo to have a great game if he's sacked 7 times and constantly on the run. With that being said, how do you guys feel about Shedeur Sanders? Him and himself, his Heisman outlook. What do you think he showed us today?
For me,
he's a struggle.
For me, it's like, I hear after last week, hearing a lot of Shedeur Sanders is the next Tom Brady. Obviously, y'all know I'm a Patriot fan. So coming from that aspect of seeing that level of play, you want a Tom Brady-like-esque quarterback. Shedeur should have been able to bring you back from 35-0 in the second half, but Shedeur couldn't do that. He had almost 3 picks that went through Oregon defenders' arms.
Did have a couple of missed throws there, absolutely. I can think of the Kyrie Jackson one in specific. It was down the sideline toward the end zone, and Xavier Weaver made a nice little play to kind of jar it out, but it.
Look at the one below it, Derek. Put that one up.
Which one am I looking at? Oh, this one. I see this one. Yeah, this is a very valid point. I think one thing I learned today is that Shedeur Sanders is the second coming of Jesus. This man he deserves the Heisman right now. Let's just give it to him. You know what I mean? Ran all over the defense, threw it over the top.
This guy also just said we don't know football, so
hey,
Sure, Shedeur threw for 500 yards against TCU. Again, we've said this 3-4 times now. TCU is a whole different team than they were last year.
Guys, what did he throw against top 10 rated Oregon? 159 yards. And 80 of those yards were in the fourth quarter.
Against second and third stringers.
I don't think you know football, Phil. Not us. And that, as Sean was saying, against our third string defense. Through 3 quarters, he had 78 total yards passing. 78.
Going into half, we had more points than Colorado had yards.
Yes.
Yeah,
we had 19 yards at the half. 19. They ran for a total of 40. That's 10 yards a quarter, people. 10.
Damn it, Phil. You're getting these guys on a rise, all right? Phil's getting in your guys' heads.
Take your troll ass back to Colorado. Thank you.
Oh, goodness.
Hey, anyone that's played ball knows this. Bo Nix is better than fucking Shedeur. I do not care. You want to say 28 of 33 for 258, 3 touchdowns, an interception, and 7 runs for 30 yards and a rushing TD? How many TDs did Shedeur have? 1 in garbage time. So I don't want to hear that I don't want to hear that Shador is better than Bo, because at the end of the day, he's not. He's not better than Caleb. He's not better than Bo. He's not better than Michael Penix. This dude is not the second coming of Tom Brady or Drew Brees.
Oh, yeah. I'm pulling up a comment on the screen right now. I think this is a very good point.
Tony.
Yep, Tony's the one. We're pulling him up as speak.
This isn't an airport. No need to announce your departure.
Oh, man. So down to Tony's comment, Shador Sanders showed poor pocket presence. And I think that's one thing that we did see that he could have controlled today. Like I said, you really can't do much when you're under duress constantly. Don't get me wrong. With that offensive line and he was being pressured, I didn't expect, a crazy performance. With that being said, I do think there was a poor pocket presence. I don't think he didn't look like he had that feel. He looked very uncomfortable. You could tell for his first step, he didn't want to step up in the pocket. He wanted to step back, and that ultimately costed him. I have it written down. Oregon had 7 sacks for minus 73 yards. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there was a lot of scrambling around in the pocket, regressing your yardage, not going the other way. Sacks obviously result in a loss of down, but when you're averaging minus 10 yards a sack, you're really doing yourself a disservice in 2 ways, I would say.
Well, and if you really want to be honest too, kind of just giving Shador some praise here. I don't want to. Kind of giving a little bit of a lesson. This shows you I know football, Phil, okay? That pocket presence. There were multiple sacks in there that Shador could have stepped up into the back end of the pocket. He doesn't have a 5-step drop like Bo does. He has a 7 or 8-step drop. That's something I noticed with him, that I didn't really notice watching other Colorado games through the first few weeks. He definitely has a deeper drop back than most veteran quarterbacks do, such as Bo or Caleb or Michael Penix. There were a couple times he could have stepped up into a pocket, attempted to make a throw to a receiver down the field. And he showed it a little bit more in the fourth quarter of, hey, he does know how to do it. But yes, when your offensive line is that fucking garbage, it makes it hard. But at the same time, you want to be an NFL quarterback like any quarterback in college does. You got to show that pocket presence.
Absolutely. And Tony brings up another good point.
Give him a couple more years and let Colorado build that program and build that offensive line in a couple of years. And Shador can be there. But to call a kid that's had 1 year of college a Heisman, come on. They played in a G5 group team. Come on. It's like saying Deion's going to lead them to the national title. Maybe in 10 years, but not in year 1. Please.
And that's the thing, too. I think, as Oregon fans, as a college football fan, we'd be lying to ourselves and everybody else if we looked at it and said, this Colorado team is just as trash as they've always been. I completely disagree. I still think Deion's got them on an excellent trajectory. I do think they're going to be competitive if he decides to stay there and that program kind of continues to build like it is. They're going to be a force to deal with down the line. I think what today showed, though, is that there's levels to it. They were just outplayed today. Oregon was the more physical team. Oregon was the faster team. Oregon was the more composed team. They were the more aggressive team. And, all those things kind of lead to a recipe for disaster, which, absolutely happened.
Yeah, 71 out of their 80 players are transfers, guys. So, Phil, you got to take that into consideration too. And
some of the commentators too were like, with Travis Hunter being out, who's next? Like, we don't know who all those transfer players are. So who's going to be next at cornerback? Obviously, it was the Amari Cooper, who Troy Franklin feasted on. Frankly, there's a big drop off from Travis Hunter down to Amari Cooper. Like,
the talent gap was enormous. The talent gap was made very evident. It was made very clear across all positions. Let's just be honest. But yeah, I completely agree.
Absolutely, Roman. I'm back on the hype train now. I hope that he I hope that he builds those kids up this week, teaches them a lesson, and I hope they pull the miracle of upsets and knock off USC at home next week. I'd be ecstatic because then I get to go on the Sunday night show and talk uber trash to Tim from SC. Love you, Tim, but me and Tim had this love-hate thing going. I asked him if he was going to come up, and he goes, are you going to buy me a ticket? And I said, man, you got all these programs, man. You can afford a ticket, Tim. Come on up. We'll meet and we'll talk and we'll sit and enjoy the game together. He ain't biting yet.
Oh, well, you actually bring up a great point. I think part of my thing is here, I'm not up here trying to trash Colorado. I don't hate them going forward. To be real honest, I hope they do pull some massive upsets this year. I think my biggest issue this week was that it felt more like disrespect to Oregon and just kind of a lack of consideration for who they are, as opposed to, complete jumping on the Colorado train, which I get. It is the biggest story in sports right now. So I do completely understand why the media is wanting to gear themselves, talk about Colorado, talk about Dion. It's the hottest story in sports. It's what people want to hear about. At the same time, as an Oregon fan looking forward to this game, it felt like there was no respect there given to the Ducks. We never heard, oh, what if Oregon wins? No. We heard, oh, Colorado's going to keep it close. How can Colorado do X, Y, and Z? And to be real honest, I was just kind of sick of Oregon not getting their flowers. I felt like there was a big lack of respect. And I think, we were talking about the Dan Lanning pregame speech earlier in the show a little bit, but I think that was also made evident. I think it was a resounding message that he wanted his players to understand, say what it is. The media was all over, they know who the media wanted to see. They know who the country wanted to see win this game, and Dan made it very clear. He's like, it doesn't matter. The better team will come out.
Wins, not clicks.
Right. And, it is what it is. I don't think it's necessarily Colorado's fault. Like I said, just being the biggest story in sports, you're going to get the clicks. But, they did try to come out and win this game. It's not what I'm saying. They weren't focused on the spotlight all week. And, they obviously wanted to win this game, just being one of the bigger games to play all year, make a statement on national TV going into Autzen. It's just, like we said, there's levels to it. They weren't built for it. Not today. Hopefully next week. I really hope they get it figured out next week, and I hope Shedeur does drop back and throw for 500. That would be great.
Okay.
I want to say this, though, that money bets, for those of you who are into sports betting, 99.98% of the bets on this game were placed on Colorado.
Yeah, I did see that according to MGM, it was one of the most bet on schools this week, being both the Colorado money line and the Colorado spread, which, like I said earlier in the show, if you guys tuned in this week, personally, I took the Colorado spread. That's what I call emotional hedging. Either I win money or I get to get on the show and talk my shit about how Oregon smacked Colorado. And guess what? I'm very happy with the latter. But, one thing I was talking to one of my other guys about, he's a major Badger fan, and Vegas doesn't lose, right? So when we saw that, you're trending in the high 90s for one team, that's usually the game you kind of want to look at and say, okay, something's going to buck here. Vegas isn't about to lose a bet that, they're 99.8% on or whatever we were just talking about. Yeah. So, and okay, I thought,
Derek,
what's that?
This guy's bringing it up there. And I've seen a little bit of chatter on Twitter, and I don't understand what everybody's thing was. There's people that are complaining about the pregame speech that Lanning made in the locker room that ABC showed.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that was bad. Respect.
Right.
I think Lanning had a good point there. I really do think Lanning had a good point there. Like, you look at who primetime is. You know, going back to Shador a little bit, you know, Tom Brady actually talked with him this week of spend less time in your Rolls Royce, spend more time in the film room studying. You know, like,
you know,
primetime is the media. Primetime is the clickbait. Primetime is primetime. Don't get me wrong. He's a great NFL player. Do I think he's a great coach? I'm not going to give him that respect yet because you showed me over 3 weeks that you can beat trash teams with talent. That's it. But you showed me today that you can't beat a cream of a crop school yet, even with talent. So at this point, I'm not going to give you that respect because at this point, all it is just talent. That's what you're beating schools with. Well, so I don't think Lanning saying, okay, you know, they're here for clicks, we're here for wins. You've got Travis Hunter who streams, who's on Bleacher Report 3 times a week. You've got Shador Sanders who has his own YouTube channel. You know, you've got Shiloh who runs his dad's social media, who runs his own YouTube, who was the one who put the video of the Colorado players stomping and raking the Oregon O. Like,
see, we'll get to that.
You've got the clicks there. That is what Dan is talking about. That is not Dan saying, well, they just want this, they just want that. No, Dan knows that team is going to come out and compete. Dan is here to win a championship. Dan is here to bring one to Oregon and bring that first championship to Oregon. He's not here to make any game personal like Deion's trying to make every game now.
That's true. And, you know, one thing I can see the chat going crazy talking about, you know, the pregame speech and stuff. So I'm kind of curious, chat, and, you know, guys in the show with me.
I want to bring this guy in.
Do you guys think Dan Lanning's pregame speech was, you know, was it meant to be a shot at Colorado? Was it more, you know, a neutral statement, more trying to gear it up, firing up our own guys? And, you know, if it was a shot, and that is an issue for somebody in the chat here, I question you and ask you, how do you feel about the Colorado players meeting midfield and, you know, stomping out the Oregon logo? After 2 weeks ago, you were just crying like a little bitch about it. You know, Shador went out there because Nebraska was out near their thing. There was no stomping that happened. But then this week, Colorado goes out there and they want to, you know, rub their little feet all over the, oh, no, that's hypocritical. So, you know, if you can't have your cake and eat it too. So I'm kind of curious, guys, you know, what are we thinking? Phil, we know what you're thinking. You know, you're not thinking a whole lot, clearly. Never really do, I can see. But, you know, that's what it is.
Phil, you're thinking Colorado's the next coming of the fucking 2010s Alabama, okay? They ain't the 2010 Alabama.
He gets it now. He did not know about the pregame deal. He did not know that Colorado did that until we just said something. Now he said it makes sense.
Which, you know, it's true.
He has walked it back.
We're absolutely shocking. You know, people, they're mad. That's fine. They can stay mad. You know, I look at us three over here. I look at the rest of the chat. We're all happy, you know. So, you know, you stay mad. That's fine. You know, it's cute. Be mad. You know, it is what it is.
Stay mad that Colorado's back to being shit.
Like I said, my thing was more the hypocrisy of the situation. You know, I to be real honest, I like it. I kind of like that, like pregame, you know, the anticipation that's built up there. I like that. You know, there was clearly a fire that was being brought, but I just think it's just different when, you know, you cry about it 1 week and then 2 weeks later you do the same thing and it's just all of a sudden a non-issue. Yeah, you know.
And like I was saying, it's like, Deion, if you're going to prove to be a decent coach, you're going to sit those players at least for a quarter. Those players who did it were still on the field. To me, that's hypocritical right there, because at that point, if it was Dan and one of our players did that, that player would not be playing whatsoever. It didn't matter who it was. Dan wouldn't take that. Like, you know, to me, like, even growing up playing ball, it was, you know, we did that to somebody on their turf. We were sitting out a quarter, a half, like. But at this point, to me, Deion's just being hypocritical with that okay, you have 7 or 8 different guys doing this and they're still on the field playing. Why?
Yeah. And Phil, in all seriousness, I do encourage you to go. I think it'll probably be a pretty quick little Google. I think the video, I think it was a TikTok actually that was filmed, but it was all over. But yeah, you can go see it there in all seriousness.
The pregame.
So you can see it on,
yeah.
You can see it on TikTok. People have kind of taken that short. Otherwise, it is on, I don't know what Shiloh Sanders' YouTube is, but on that, like, video he put up like a couple days ago of them arriving in Oregon, giving them free range of Otson. It's like a 9-minute video on YouTube that you can go look up and you can see it all right there.
Yeah. Like, it is what it is. I understand, young dudes, absolutely highly competitive. You kind of want to assert your dominance. You want to go out there and show you're intimidating and you're not scared of the opponent. So don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and demonize them for it because, the shit happens. And to be honest, that's kind of what makes college football fun from time to time. But like I said, I got to speak about it from a Duck fan perspective, and just being the Duck fan, obviously it is disrespectful, just the same way that Shiloh had felt that Matt Rule and the rest of the Nebraska team were being disrespectful by gathering at their logo. Shiloh had a direct quote talking about how he thought that, it was a shot at Colorado, and that logo did stand for like all the hard work that they put in. And sure, I understand that, obviously these guys are all D1 athletes and they dedicate their lives to coming out here and being the best version of themselves on the football field. But you can't come out and say that and then the very next week go into a hostile environment and do the same thing to your opponent as an active sign of disrespect. So, it is what it is. We're going to move on. It's going to be something that I'm not going to think about again after this week. It's fine. It's an extra
offense.
Yeah.
Talking about the offense and the way we started this game and the domination in that first half that just put the game away.
Absolutely. So, just digging into the offense, one thing that we were talking about is Oregon's fast start. So the series went touchdown, Colorado 3 and out, touchdown, Colorado 6 and out, touchdown. What do you guys think that did for the Oregon team, their morale, how they felt going forward? Do you think I ultimately think that made the difference? How do you guys feel?
Absolutely. After that second score, when Colorado went 6 and out and they had to punt already down 14-0, you see Shedeur Sanders walking back to the sideline like this. Head down, not running off the field, but walking very slowly with his head down. Not going anywhere near his dad. He's just going to the nearest exit stage left that he can get to and the fastest because he knows he's in for a long day. This game's over, and we're not even at the end of the first quarter yet.
Well, for me, like the offense, like that push that we are getting against their defensive line to open those holes for Bucky, for Noah, for Jordan, like that got our run game going when, against Texas Tech, null and void. Obviously, we had it last week against Hawaii, but we were a little discouraged going against Hawaii. Okay, we can't run the ball now. That's not our identity anymore. But I feel like that offensive line kind of got it, and just here we go, holes upon holes that you could probably run a Mack truck through at that point with that offensive line. And
Bo got sacked twice.
That he did. Absolutely. I think one thing that it kind of does when you're able to come out here right away and you're able to assert yourself on offense is that, when you're down 13-0 real quick, it kind of pulls you away from your game plan, right? So Colorado, obviously, they did have a game plan coming into this game. They knew if they were going to be successful in trying to win this game, they had to execute on certain levels. But I think what happens here is that, when you're down early, it pulls you away from your game plan. And I think we saw this as a prime example against the Texas Tech game. So Oregon got down and, we talked about how there was no run game after that. Well, we clearly saw that we pulled away from the game plan. And I think that's exactly what had happened here with Colorado. They had no identity. They had to play from behind. They had to play with a little bit more urgency. And, that with the fact that the defense is shutting them down, and the offense on the other side of the ball continues to score at will. It really deflates the tires. And like you said, Spaz, one thing that I also noticed in the first quarter, obviously the camera is going to pan in on to Shedeur a lot. But what we saw was the body language thing for me. So there was two different instances, and I believe one was after the first Oregon drive, and the other one was just before halftime. But he was walking to the sidelines, like you said. He had his head down. He walked right to the end of the bench, sat there right by himself. And that's not the same player we were seeing week in and week out against the TCU, Nebraska, and Colorado State. He was fired up on the sidelines, had a lot of energy going. And I think Oregon was kind of able to deflate that balloon tonight, and it really threw him off. It was really nice. In terms of the rest of the offense, we talked about the run game was going to be highly important here today. Oregon ran for 240 yards, averaging 6.3 yards a carry. How are we feeling about that, Baz?
That's exactly my point, is that, we are not one-dimensional by any aspect. This team, and Sean said it earlier, how, our running back room is probably 6 deep. There's up to 6 guys in that running back room that can carry the rock at any given time. It's definitely top 4 deep as far as either of our 4 top running backs can go for 100+ yards a game easily. And we haven't even pumped the gas on any big major runs or anything. Will Stein has came in and just made this a very confusing, complex offense. There's a couple of times, even the announcers for Oregon on the radio network were saying there was times they got fooled on the punt. I got fooled on the punt. Mm-hmm. The camera guy got fooled on the punt because he followed the punter at first before he realized the guy was actually running. It's complex, but it works together. You don't know whether we're going to run the ball or whether we're going to run the ball and then all of a sudden throw it at the last second. Mm-hmm. You just don't know what Oregon's offense is going to do. And that makes us even more dangerous. Are we going to throw for 500 yards? No. Are we going to run for 500 yards? No. But we're probably going to run for 200 to 300 yards a game, and we're probably going to pass for 200 to 300 yards a game. And that at a minimum is 500 to 600 yards per game. If your offense is running 500 to 600 yards per game, mm-hmm. you're going to win games.
You are.
Especially if you have a defense like we did today.
And that's the key right there. So, today we had a potent offense scoring at will, running. And like you said, Spaz, I think just looking at the offense this year, this Will Stein offense, I would say this is one of the more balanced offenses so far that I've seen Oregon have. I love Kenny Dillingham. I love Kenny Dillingham. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, I was very sad to see him go in this offseason just with the question mark of what a new OC would look like. But like you bring up a very great point. I think Oregon, their playbook looks extremely balanced, and being able to run, being able to pass, being able to do all these things, it's able to open up the offense. It's you get to adjust to the defense. So, a breakdown I was kind of watching this week on TV, they were talking about Colorado's defense, and the too high safety look. Colorado loves the too high safety look. What they were not able to do was stay in that too high safety look today because Oregon was gashing them up the middle with these runs, averaging 6.3 yards a carry, They were loading the box with 6-7 at a time. Sometimes they had an 8-man box at one point, and Bucky ran through 3 men and had a 12-yard gain. It was phenomenal to see. The offensive line in terms of Oregon, it was a question mark we had coming into this season just because we knew that these players weren't cohesive. They've never played together. We brought in a lot of transfers. We brought in a lot of guys who haven't had a lot of gelled snaps, snaps together. I thought the offensive line played really well despite, the two sacks on Bo as well. So it was really nice to see that. Obviously, Troy Franklin showed exactly who he was today. Troy had 8 catches, 126 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think, once again, we knew Troy was going to get the ball. We know who our wide receiver one is, and it was really, really nice to see him get fed and just have a field day on the outside. I think the national audience kind of got to see exactly who he is and his potential. So, yeah, it was really nice to see that as well. But, Spaz, on this other side of that, even more so, I want to talk about the defense a little bit here. Earlier we were talking about Kyrie Jackson. In my opinion, I thought that man, he really set the tone for the defense. I don't believe he got beat on a route. He had, 3 deflected passes, a near interception on some deep shots. He really anchored down the secondary today, and I think overall that was huge. Shedeur, he was never 100% comfortable. He knew he wasn't dropping back and throwing the ball up. It wasn't happening. So that was nice to see. And aside from that, even more impressively, I think, was our defensive line. So that's something we've been talking about for a couple of years now, how we needed that Oregon pass rush to be there. And I think it was there and then some. 7 sacks, minus 73 yards. What do you think about the D-line, Spaz? What do you think? What does it mean going forward? Is the D-line here? Was it just a product of Colorado's offensive line being subpar? What do you think this means for our D-line going forward?
I think it could be a little bit of all the above, but I will say the fact I just saw more. I saw more energy from the first snap. I saw the defensive guys just jamming to the ball, jamming to their receivers, and guys tackling, and they just seemed like they had a different fire under them today. And our usual suspects, we had 7 sacks with Jordan Birch, the transfer from Alabama, got 2 sacks today, and he was in on Shedeur a ton of times. And Jamal Hill finally got a sack. He looked much better today. Mm-hmm. And Dorless is just continuing to be Dorless. Had what I thought he should have got a half a sack for, but he didn't. So in my eyes, he had a sack and a half. The defensive line just really showed up today, and secondary too as well. I mean, we shut down two prolific guys, 2 of their receivers. I mean, what did they get for receiving? Nothing.
No, I think passing yards, they had 150 total yards, something right around that ballpark number. But yeah, I thought the defensive play overall was stout. The D-backs were great. I know that was a concern a lot of Duck fans had. The national media had a big concern about the Duck secondary just because, let's be real.
Weaver got 9 catches for 75 yards, an average of 8.3. His longest catch was 21 yards. That was their longest pass play of the game, 21 yards. And Michael Harrison, the guy I thought showed up last week, had 3 catches for 22 yards, and one of them was a late touchdown against our third-string defense at that point with 3 minutes left in the game. We shut them down. You could call it their offensive line issues. Some of it, yeah. But Sanders still passed the ball 30 plus times, and never got one pass over 20 yards completed.
Yeah, limiting big plays in games where you're playing a major underdog is massive, right? I mean,
and this is the guy that the last 2-3 weeks that the national media has been blowing up and stating how he's the second coming of Jesus Christ at Notre Dame or whatever, because he's thrown for 500 yards. He's thrown for 500 yards. He threw for another 400 yards. What did he do against when he first hit a major top 10, top 20 program? He fell right on his ass, because it just showed what playing solid teams that are built, that are experienced, versus teams that are
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to trash Shedeur's too bad play just because, like I said, I didn't expect him to have a major game if he's sacked 7 times and there's umpteen, QB hurries. You really can't do a lot with that. And especially with the secondary play we were just talking about, he had nobody open.
I gave him 31. I gave him 31 points going in. I said they would score 31 points. They scored 6.
Yeah. And, if we go back to our predictions, I don't have them on the screen that I can pull up for you guys, but each of us had at least 24 points for Colorado. At least.
Yeah, it's not like we were like, oh, we're just going to. None of us on this panel thought that we all thought Oregon would beat the spread.
Mm-hmm.
We were a little suspect about it because we were all like, 21 points is kind of a lot, because based on what Shedeur had done, the first 3 weeks, we're like, yeah, what we'd seen out of our defense, we were like, that's why all of us predicted at least 20 plus points for him, because we all thought for sure at least our defense would give up some. But this defense today, it was like, this was like a 2010 Chip Kelly defense. It was just mean, nasty, and they weren't giving up no holes, no slip screens, nothing all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was overall, they looked extremely aggressive in my opinion. And I know that's something you had brought up right away is like, you noticed it right from that first drive. You heard those pads clapping every time Colorado was touching that ball. It's at least I can't remember off the top of my head. Actually, I can think of 2 runs where there were a couple missed tackles, but overall, I thought Oregon tackled really well. That was much improved. But yeah, kind of going back to what you're talking about here, it's so hard to know early in the year, because if you're looking at this Colorado team, you're like, okay, they went in and they beat TCU, the defending, national championship appearance team. And then you look at Oregon and you're like, oh, they gave up 30 to Texas Tech and it was a close game down to the wire. Well, there's more to the story than just looking at this box score at the end of the game and saying, oh, Colorado's good because they won here. Oregon's not good because they kept this game close. It's something we talked about. Showed that they were able to overcome adversity against Texas Tech. I think that's going to come back and be a benefactor for Oregon as the season goes on. But I think we also have to look at Colorado after this game and say, okay, what do we really have here? And, it's hard to speculate on that, but I think we're really going to find out next week when USC comes to town. And one thing I thought it was interesting, too, somebody had brought up in the comments that earlier, I wasn't able to pull it up in time, but Oregon's not even the best defensive line that Colorado is going to face this year. I think he's in real trouble when let's call it for what it is. USC has a better defensive line. Utah absolutely has a better defensive line. UCLA's defensive line looks great. So there are other Pac teams out there who have some really, really strong defensive lines. And I think what we saw today is that's going to be a major, major hurdle for this Colorado team going forward. It's really hard to win games when you're running for your life behind the pocket the entire time.
Yeah, exactly.
What else do we got here? Oh, another point we wanted to bring up. Defensively speaking, something that kind of surprised me today, Evan Williams had a sack and a half today. They were using that man. Yeah, secondary blitzes were very, very common today, and they were extremely effective for the most part. It's always kind of a gamble when you're moving up your secondary and bringing them into the backfield like that, but Oregon covered themselves really well. So it's kind of interesting to see Evan Williams get in there. Onto some negatives. It's really easy to sit here and say, oh, it was a great game. Oregon did everything perfectly. It was a blowout. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. One problem I have still is the penalties, 9 penalties for 80 yards. That can't happen. Now we're going on 3 weeks in a row where penalties have been an issue. It's big plays being taken back. It's tough. That really needs to get figured out here. And I know Dan said it was a point of emphasis this week, but it didn't really show, in my opinion. How are you feeling, Spaz?
I'm feeling like I just lost my train of thought.
The penalties. So Oregon had 9 penalties for 80
penalties,
yards.
Yeah. The one that I was talking about in our group chat right out of the gate. I said, here we go. Penalties. 5 minutes into the game. But yet by about the end of the first half, we weren't getting many penalties anymore. All of a sudden, Colorado was getting penalized every third play. And so they kind of switched up, and it was nice to see.
I agree. I think the second half, it was significantly better. I think Dan probably got in their ass in the locker room, letting them know, I don't care what the scoreboard says. You guys need to clean up your play. And, it happened. And, vice versa. Like you said, Colorado absolutely shot themselves in the foot time and time and time again with these penalties. Where did I have it?
12. They had would they have 12?
12 penalties for 105 yards. When you're
ready. We had 9 for 80. Yeah.
That's something that needs to get cleaned up. If we have 9 penalties for 80 yards against, the Washingtons, the USCs of the world, it's probably not going to be in our favor. Absolutely needs to get cleaned up. It does make me feel better. We're playing Stanford next week. You know what I mean? You can choose what you want to emphasize this week, and I'm going to put it that way. And I think penalties are going to be a focal point. But yeah, that definitely needs to get cleaned up. What else?
Yeah, that'd be another 42-6 game. Somewhere along those lines.
Exactly.
Tampa's bad. They're one of the worst. Unfortunately for them, they're one of the worst teams in the nation this year.
Spaz, I don't even feel bad about it. All those years in the 2010s, delivering these absolutely heartbreaking losses to the Ducks, I have no remorse for these guys. I hope they're enjoying the cellar. Respectfully.
What was it? 2014. They knocked our 20-some year undefeated streak at home when they came in on the opening game of the year, the Pac-12 season opener, and beat us 31-24. Yeah. Enjoy the cellar, Stanford.
Unfortunately, they don't have any fans. They don't have any fans, so I don't think we're hurting anybody's feelings in the chat right now talking about Stanford. But yeah,
there'll probably be 70 to 30 Duck fans down there next week. Easy.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm in California.
A 2-hour flight or a 10-hour drive from here.
I think I'm sitting at about 4.5 hours from Palo Alto right now.
Dude, you could pick up a ticket for $30 or less right now for that game. I've seen them on Ticketmaster.
I believe that. Fortunately, I think that's a game I'm going to choose to watch from my couch and say, oh, okay. I don't think they need my help there.
You should totally go to that game because there's going to be nobody there. You can get right down there to the players, everything. That would be your opportunity to get right there, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, I'm not sure if you're referring to former NFL wide receiver Travis Henry. That dude's been retired for 10 years, but yes, Travis Hunter was missing today. Travis Hunter, yeah, he was missing. And don't get me wrong. Yeah. It had an impact, but it wasn't going to affect the final score of the game, unfortunately. I mean, maybe marginally, but, at the end of the day, I think the dominant team showed who they were. It wasn't going to happen, so him and his draft onesie streaming 2K, it is what it is. I hope I can't wait to see him heal up. And like I said, I think Colorado is going to be able to have a chance to pull some upsets as the season progresses, just playing some of the teams they are. Fortunately, didn't matter this week. Better team won.
Yeah, Jason, I believe Dowdell will probably be our RB3 going forward. I think a lot of it also depends on, the kind of running we're looking to do. I think Dowdell's more of the power back. He's more of the Ezekiel Elliott, big power it up. Whereas, what's the other one? Other kid,
Jordan James,
yeah. He's more of a slasher. He's get to the outside quicker and can hit those edge rushes for you to get chunk yardage. But Dowdell is usually one of our top 3 backs as well. So I think it's pretty close between him and Jordan James. Absolutely. Either one of them can be 3-4.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see happen, just, if we're just going off snap counts from the previous weeks, Jordan James vastly outsnaps Dante Dowdle. So I think he's going to slide into that too. I think he's deserved it. He's been a excellent back. With that being said, yeah, Dante Dowdle, he's probably going to step into the 3. I think we're going to see a little bit of Jaden Lamar as we go too. He's a receiving back a little bit more. He's a little more shifty. And like you said, Spaz, there's some contrasting styles there between the Buckies, the Noahs, the Jordan Jameses, the Dante Dowdells of the world.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what defense you're facing, the power of the defense. Do these guys have a good run defense? Do they have a good interior run defense? Do they have a bad edge? Can you hit them on the edge, or are you better hitting them up the middle? Kind of depends on who you're going to have in a lot of times. And that's the mark of a good coordinator, is being able to do those kind of adjustments.
Absolutely. You understand your team's strengths, so like we said, I think Levi, Jordan, I think we're going to see a lot of Jaden Lamar, actually. I think he's going to be like a receiving back. I think in those slightly longer yardage situations, you're going to kind of see him come in there and, maybe be able to use him as a skill set is currently. But yeah, there's vastly contrasting styles, and Bucky, he's definitely the jack of all trades. That man, you look at him, if you just look at him, you're like, oh, that man's shifty. Absolutely, he's shifty, but he will run through your face, as we've seen tonight over and over again.
Yeah. What do you think of Bo not taking as many hits, as many runs?
To be real honest, I think, if we didn't need it, I'm very grateful that he wasn't running around all the time. It's just you don't really want to put him in position like that to injure himself, especially when the game's out of hand. I think Oregon understood to a point that they were running the ball at will with their backs. If Bo wanted to drop back and pass, Bo was dropping back and passing. I don't think he necessarily needed to use his legs. With that being said, I think once Washington comes to town, UW game, USC game, Utah game, Bo is going to do what he has to do, and I think we're going to see him use his legs a little bit more. But I'm happy to see that he wasn't running 10 times and, taking some major hits. I think any contact he had was very, very minor for the most part.
Do you think we could use his legs more against a Washington or USC type of? Are we going to need to have Bo run the games as well? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think games. Yeah, I think so. I think, like we saw with Texas Tech, a slightly more physical defense. When your back's against the wall, it gives yourself another outlet. I think we will see some designed runs, but where Bo tends to be really effective is when he's reading the defense and then, taking off, stepping up in the pocket and taking off in his open lanes. Very effective that way. Bo is quite shifty. He's a little faster than a lot of people tend to believe. But yeah, I think
credit for
Yeah, I think once, like we said, if we're using the Washington game, for example, just because that's the next biggest one coming up, in my opinion, I think we're going to see him use his legs a little bit more. The Washington defense, they're not an all-world team, but they have a decent defense, and they're going to give Oregon some fits at times. Bo's going to have to use his legs, and it's a really nice outlet to be able to have that as like a backup, a contingency plan, if you will. Oh, what else do we got? One other thing I wanted to touch on here, Spaz. So it's a major win. I don't think there's any arguing that. It's a top 20 win, a top 20 absolute ass kicking at that. What are your expectations going forward? So whether that be, the end of the season, are you expecting a Pac-12 championship berth? I mean, I think to say you expect a college football playoff is, I'm going to stay away from that. It's not my... There's just too many good teams out here. But what are your personal expectations for this team going forward after what you saw today?
If the defense continues to step up and improve like we did today, if that's the kind of defense you're going to have week in and week out against this conference, and yes, that people are going to say, coming into this week, everybody was saying, we're going to get shredded by Shedeur passing wise and whatnot. And because he was averaging over 400 yards a game and he got less than half of what he has been getting the first 3 games of the year.
Yeah.
We have that kind of defense going against Penix and Caleb Williams and Cam
Cam
Rising.
Rising, yeah.
I mean, Cam Rising is a dual threat quarterback, especially. So is Caleb Williams. Penix is not so much. He's more of a pocket guy. He just throws the ball.
Sure.
So you know what you got to do there. But against the dual threat quarterbacks, and Shador was a dual threat quarterback going into this game. And he didn't really have that dual threat capability at all today. So if you have that kind of defense going forward, I mean, the sky's the limit. Maybe Dan Lanning is on to something, the way he handled himself in the press conferences and the game today. It was a different Dan Lanning. It reminded me of a very stout Chip Kelly. Short, sweet, and to the point, and effective. Yeah, he's got his players locked in now.
And I think we saw that coming into the game. Like I say, it really looked like a no bullshit mentality coming into this game. You know, Oregon looked like they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they asserted themselves. You know, it is what it is, and I think that isn't a testament.
That is a difference in coaching that we haven't seen here since probably Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly was a no bullshit, run it down your throat. I'm going to run it 500 times a game, and you're not going to stop it. And that's what he did. And it damn near won us a national title. And he was also very strict, very stringent, to the point. He was quick in his conversations in the media. He didn't do a lot of talking. He just did his actions on the field.
You said it too. You know, I would have to agree. You know, I think at this point, Dan Lanning's quickly becoming one of my favorite coaches that we've been able to see, you know, lead this Oregon Ducks team. I think it's a vastly different mentality and play style that we saw from Mario. Obviously, you know, the one Willie Taggart year was a complete dumpster fire, and they had zero identity that year. Mark Helfrich, you know, that season I would say is a little more close to what we're seeing right now. But yeah, if we're going back even farther, I think you're 100% spot on with it. I think Dan Lanning has a very business-minded mentality. You know, with the media, he's not going to come out here and he's not going to talk about his opponents and say they can't do X, Y, and Z. You know, he says, we're doing this. This is what we're doing, you know, and as a player, you know, that's really nice to see. You know, you could tell them boys were fired up. They came out fired up. They played like they were fired up. I think Dan Lanning's the man for the job, you know, and people are going to hate on him for what it is, and that's fine. You know, you don't have to be a fan of everybody, but me as an Oregon fan, and it sounds like you as an Oregon fan, Spaz, absolutely loving the Dan Lanning show.
Your pops is doing a good job, Derek.
Yeah, apparently Dan Lanning, my dad, looked like a little Dan Lanning Jr. I don't agree with it. You know, it is what it is. I'm taking it as a compliment. But yeah, as a coach, I love the business mentality. I love that, you know, there is a little more emphasis on the defense than there has been in previous years. And I love the I'm going to drive it through your face mentality that we didn't see with Mario. You know, he was one to very quickly take the gas or pedal off the gas, you know.
You're right. And that's why we don't really. The difference here is on our shows, we pretty much just kind of talk about the game at hand that we just finished. We're like Dan Lanning. We're not looking 6 weeks ahead to UST. We're not looking 3 weeks ahead to Washington. We're looking next week to Stanford, and that's our objective. We won the game today. We played a solid game, all aspects. Special teams. How about that fake punt on 4th and 5 from inside your own 20? Who the fuck calls that?
Big Balls Lanning. That's who calls it. That was the very moment when I understood he wanted to make this game out of reach fast. He wanted to show without a doubt who the better team on the field was. And man, what a play call, having 307-pound Casey Rogers rumbling down the field for, I don't have the exact number. I think it was like 18 yards or something like that. But
18 yards, yeah. Yeah.
What a play call.
Casey's officially put in his request to the coaches that he wants running back 5 position.
The goal line package led by our man, Casey Rogers.
That's correct.
And like we were talking about it before we jumped on the show, man. He fooled me. He fooled the cameraman. Everybody was fooled.
The
Before
guy's going like this, and then he goes, "Oh."
Yeah, what a play. I mean, I wouldn't expect it. You know what I mean? I would never expect it. Just being in that position when you're only up at, I believe it was 2 scores at that point. If you don't convert there.
Yeah, it was early in the game.
I think it was 13-0 at that point. So.
Yeah, I think there was like maybe 6 minutes left in the first quarter or something. It was still first quarter, I believe.
Yeah. And if you don't
convert. Like, what? Yeah.
You were just inviting the pendulum to swing Colorado's way if you don't convert that. But, I think it goes back to he had a trust in his men. They knew what they wanted to do. Everybody was on board, Them boys were ready to do what they had to do to win today.
Casey Rogers said in the post game, because they were interviewing him on the radio, and he said, we've been practicing that play for like the last 3 or 4 weeks. And they were told shortly before they went out onto the field for that punt, they were told to expect that possibility call to come. Well, after they went out and got lined up, he said they didn't call it. And then all of a sudden, he said one of their guys moved a certain direction opposite of where he was shortly before the snap, and they audibled to that play call. And that's how they got that. Somewhere along the line, one of Colorado's defenders moved somewhere where he shouldn't have moved, and they knew that if he moved to that spot, they could make that spot move.
Yeah, they played to their strength in numbers. I think I know exactly what you're talking about when that edge rusher shifted a little bit outside. Then you saw that Poland man come through, and that gap went whoop and opened right up. You could drive a Mack semi truck through that gap. But once again, that's just a testament to the adjustments that you're able to make. Smart players, smart coaches. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. I was madly impressed. I love to see the aggressiveness, to be real honest. I hope that's something, not necessarily fake punts from our own 17, but the aggressiveness, I hope that's something we see continued throughout the year. It makes it a lot of fun to watch. Let's see. What else do we got?
Yes. First half, 19 of 21 for 293 yards, 3 scores for Cam Moore on the 14th ranked defense in the nation.
Whew. Yeah, that's impressive. That's going to work.
That's scary numbers.
I almost can't believe it. You know what I mean? Like
one incompletion for almost 300 yards and 3 scores in the first half, and a rushing touchdown as well.
The efficiency there, my God.
Wow. I mean, Bo was 22 or 23 of 28 or whatever it was. He missed 5 passes, 82%.
Yeah.
And this guy's missed 3 now.
293.
Just insane.
And we saw last year.
Did not see that.
No,
did not see that against the Beaver defense.
And that's more what I'm saying.
We are conference play. Oregon's defense shows up. Oregon State's defense is looking like hamburger meat right now. Granted, it's in Pullman. Granted, it's against Washington State. But what does this say for Washington State? They keep this up. They're 4-0. Nobody. Tell me anybody had Washington State winning 4 games alone.
Well, especially if we're, say they're able to pull this upset off right now and beat Oregon State. So then they have 2 ranked wins already. They beat Wisconsin early in the year. Then now they're doubling up Oregon State, which, I think if you would have asked us prior to this week, we would have said, yeah, I'm going to take Oregon State in this one, slightly more physical. They have different play styles, not what I'm saying, but overall, I thought Oregon State was going to be that team. But it goes back to the Pac-12 just eating itself up, man. That happens every year. Every single year.
Cannibalism is starting.
Yeah, absolutely. So then you're going to see somebody come out, beat Washington State that has no business beating Washington State, and then Oregon State's probably going to just drop a 50 ball on them. That's just how the Pac works, man. It's a wild, wild west in the Pac for sure. And
we just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. We were talking about the future. We don't know. I mean, would I love to sit here and say right now that I think Oregon's the front runner? I believe they are, in my opinion. But this isn't any given Saturday conference this year, and there's going to be some serious cannibalism. It would not surprise me if the conference champion this year is 7-3. That wouldn't surprise me.
Hey, that's true. And we talked about that, prior to the year starting too, is just when you have the pedigree of quarterbacks that you do in the pack, somebody's bound to get eaten up. You're not going to contain some of these quarterbacks week in and week out. Somebody's going to break through at some point, and you're going to look at the score and go, oh, how did that happen? It happens every year. And I think, unfortunately, the reality is, more likely than not, it's probably going to happen to Oregon at some point. It happens to every team. If we were sitting at the end of the year 12-0, man, I would be beyond shocked, to put it that way.
And based on where what I see right now, if this continues over the next couple of weeks, which it should, we should beat Stanford. I think Washington plays Arizona State next week. Arizona or Arizona State. Okay. And then we both have our bye. I mean, look, who does Washington play next week? They play Arizona. Granted, It's in the desert, but they should win that game. Mm-hmm. They win that game. We beat Stanford next week. I believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that game day will be in Seattle on October 8th. You can just about mark my words on that, because the only other game that week that's really significant is Notre Dame and SC. They're not going to do Notre Dame twice in 3 weeks. Just doesn't happen. Just like they wouldn't come here this week for game day with both undefeated teams. So I can pretty much say, if we're going to be, if they go to the UW and game day shows up, my ass is trying to figure out how to get there. Because I want to experience game day. I've never experienced game day yet.
Yeah, myself either. And I know a lot of Duck fans, they were kind of disappointed this week that game day wasn't going to be there. Once again, I know we talked about game day doesn't go to spots 2 weeks in a row. Cover teams 2 weeks in a row wasn't going to happen. But what that does do, Spaz, is it sets up a highly anticipated top 10 matchup, barring both teams are able to get out undefeated next week against Stanford and Arizona, respectively. It's going to be a major game. I would personally right now put my money on it. Game day will be there. They will be covering that game.
Washington's going to be at least 7, because either Notre Dame or Ohio State is losing today. One of them is. So that means Washington's going to move to at least 7.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon's going to move to at least 9. Then you got 2 more weeks of that to see what happens in the top 7. Therefore, you could have a 6-7, 5-6, 7-8 matchup. And when they get that high, that's when game day usually goes to, is those type of games. You get 2 top 10 teams versus each other, you bound to find game day there.
Absolutely. One other thing I see in the comments going wild right now, Oregon, Utah, going to be a tough game. Once again, I am attempting to stay as focused on the nearest games possible. To be real honest with you, I am overlooking Stanford a little bit, just because there's so much hype around the next game. But yeah, absolutely. Oregon going into Salt Lake City has been very difficult. Playing Utah in general has been very difficult over the last few years. That team is always ready to go. They're a very disciplined team. And like you said, they don't really match up all that well. So it is going to be a little interesting to see what adjustments are able to be made, what the game plan is coming into that game, just because you are playing a different style of personnel, you're playing a different style of defense altogether. But,
UCLA had 243 total yards against Utah today, and 234 of them were passing. They had 9 rushing yards against Utah today. 9.
And that's it too, especially when your bread and butter is running the ball. Obviously you want to control the tempo of the game. You want to be able to move the ball at will on the ground, but man, that's some tough sledding against a very, very, very stout Utah front, and their linebacker play has never been a joke either. Their linebackers have always been physical. I think of Devin Lloyd right off the bat. That man was an animal. And I think we're going to see something similar.
UCLA was 3 of 17 on third downs. Utah was 6 of 17. Utah only finished with 219 yards. They had 102 rushing, and Nick Johnson passed for 117 yards of 9 of 17. But they ran the ball 45 times for 100 yards. That's horrible.
Yeah.
2.8 yards a carry.
Oh, one thing to note here in that UCLA-Utah game, UCLA did start a true freshman. I think asking a true freshman to go into Salt Lake is, man, you talk about a tall task. You know what I mean? I think
his first pass was a pick 6.
That's a very, very tough way to go. Very tough way to start. And then in terms of the rush yards that UCLA had, I see one thing that's skewed here. Dante Moore, 10 rushes for minus 51 yards. So that's definitely skewing a little bit, and it's kind of going back to, I think we saw him got happy feet in the pocket. He probably tried to regress in the pocket a little bit as opposed to stepping up when under pressure, and probably had the same effect on it that Shedeur did today when he was moving backwards in the pocket and taking these sacks for minus 10, minus 12, minus 14 yards.
He got sacked 7 times himself. There's your minus yardage.
Yeah, I can't even look at one game right now and say that's going to be the game. There are so many difficult games on this schedule as we speak. So I think I'm going to choose to look at the Stanford week this week, and I'm going to soak in it, just knowing that we're probably walking away with another dub this week. Let's call it what it is. But, man, I'm a little nervous.
Has the line even opened up on that yet, I wonder? Probably hasn't. Probably won't open until tomorrow.
No. Yeah, I don't know. And then, finally.
No, line's not open on that yet.
Fair enough. Probably see that at the end.
It probably opens at 20.
I could see that even being a little. Yeah, I could see it being slightly higher. Granted, they are in Palo Alto next week, so that does make a difference slightly, marginally. You're not at home, not quite the same juice, probably not the same intensity, not necessarily a game you got circled on the calendar. But, and then.
Now, 25 of 29 for 356 and 5 scores.
Who's that?
Cam Ward. He's got 4 incompletions for almost 400 yards.
So this man has more scores than he does in completions.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm talking about, man. The cannibalism in the pack is uncanny. Yeah, man, that's tough. I hope there are no Duck fans that are looking at that Washington State game going, oh, yeah, we should, that's going to be an easy win. Never has been. Ain't going to be this year. Yeah. Hey, yeah. Man, the deeper we get into that pack play, we know anything happens.
Any given Saturday, that's right.
Hey, any given Saturday, And then thought one more little topic of conversation before we get out of here for the day, Spaz. I was watching the post-game interview, and I thought one thing that was really interesting from Dan Lanning is, one of the first things he did, he sat down and he said, I need to humble myself. He's like, sometimes I get really excited. He goes, it's the competitive nature, but he's like, I understand this is one game. We're on to the next one already. And I think that is an incredibly professional attitude to carry after a major win, after the national media didn't want to talk about Oregon all week. They wanted to ask Dan about Dion. They wanted to ask Dan about how's Colorado doing, you know? So it was really.
He didn't
Yeah.
bite till this morning.
I love it.
And I truly believe the only reason he bought that pregame deal, the only reason, one of the things I saw was one of my friends was telling me on Twitter that they were like, the way he stated that message had to have to do with that pregame with what Colorado did.
Mm-hmm.
Because normally Oregon coaches don't let the media into the locker room for their pregame speeches like that. And that was something that a couple of people on Twitter had said too. They were surprised that Oregon let the media in for his pregame presser to the team.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit about sending a message, you know, to the national media, you know, and to be real honest, I feel like that was a little bit even more toward the national media and such than Colorado specifically. You know, obviously there was some blatant disrespect by stomping on the logo pregame, but at the same time, like we were just talking about, man, the national media, they wanted to talk about one thing and one thing only, and that was the Dion, the Coach Prime, the hype train that is Colorado. And, you know, I'm not going to be a hater going forward, but this week, man, it was so sweet watching them, you know, get a piece of humble pie themselves. So that's exciting. And then, you know, one more thing that Dan says, the nation got to see who Oregon is today. And I think, once again, that's very true. They showed them who they can be on the defensive side of the ball. They showed them that they have an offensive identity. They're an aggressive team. They're a team that's not going to back down. So, man, overall, it was a massive, massive game. Duck Nation should be really happy with our performance so far. And then actually one more thing that I wanted to bring up here real quick. Oregon did get a commit today. Granted, class of 2026, we're way, way out. So, you know, as we know, no matter who you're a fan of, flips happen, things happen all the time in the scape of recruiting. With that being said, they did secure a commitment from a 5-star defensive lineman, Tony Cumberland, today. He's a top 20 consensus player. You know, probably going to end up as a 5-star plus. But, you know, that's big news going forward. Hopefully that early relationship pays dividends toward the end of his recruiting cycle. But, Spaz, that is all I got for today. Anything else you'd like to discuss before we jump on out of here for the night and go enjoy the rest of that fresh victory feeling?
I'm just looking. I'm looking forward to bye week in a couple of weeks.
Looking forward to bye week.
Does that mean we get a bye week too?
I don't know.
Or do we go in and talk about Washington for 2 weeks? Because that could be a big topic to talk about in the next couple of weeks.
That
Both
is true.
of us have our bye week. That's very unusual for both teams to have a bye week. That's another thing that I think sets it up for game day, is because you're going to have 2 top 10 teams that are both coming off their only bye week of the year, and that particular game is going to be the game that could be the start or the end of their possible title campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Because if whoever wins that game is probably in the lead and has that option of being able to jump into the top 5 and possibly be there in that CFP conversation. If you lose, the good thing is you lost to another top 10 team.
There it is.
And it's early in the season. So you have that opportunity to climb back up. But it's going to make that climb a little bit harder.
Yeah, and, you know, like we were just talking about, the cannibalism that is the pack, I think that's kind of where that cannibalism is going to play into the favor of the team who does end up losing that game. You know, Washington and Oregon, those are two teams who are, in the definitely the playoff conversation. Obviously there's a long way to go and there's a lot of things that need to be ironed out and, see where these teams are headed going forward. But yeah, like you said, I think whoever loses that game, they're far from over in that story. They're absolutely still in contention for a Pac-12 championship, maybe even further, just because there is going to be a lot of cannibalism that happens in the pack between Oregon, USC, Utah, UW, even UCLA, obviously, they're a very formidable team.
One loss in the pack, you're probably still alive, and especially if it happens early in the season. In the next couple 3 weeks, if you take that first conference loss in the next couple 3 weeks, you still have that possibility to move up and contend. But if you take that loss down in week 10, week 11, you're probably saying goodbye. And if you get 2 losses, you're not making the CFP. But a one-loss Pac-12 team definitely right now has the opportunity, because right now there's 3 Pac-12 teams in the top 10. Yeah.
And I think, just making that even bigger, talking about the playoff, just watching college football as a whole this year, I don't see a team that I look at and say, oh yeah, they're definitely going undefeated. Every team that I've seen so far this year has their holes. You talk about the Alabamas, the Georgias with their quarterback problems, FSU, Florida State. They to me, it was a great game. That was a rivalry game today. That's a game that Clemson definitely had circled on their calendar, so I'm not going to look at them and say, oh, they struggled with Clemson. Like, I completely expected that to happen, but they have holes just like everybody else.
But I will say this, that probably just about locked Florida State into the CFP, because I don't see anybody else on their schedule that can even sniff them.
That's true, and that is very true at face value.
Because they are in the weak-ass ACC, but...
Yeah, but, like I said, there's cannibalism that happens in every league. Last week they struggled with BC, which, it happens. Teams struggle with lesser teams. You play down to your opponent sometimes. That's just the reality of the situation. But, it's any given Saturday, and I think that's the thing that makes college football so great is you never really know until, the final whistle's blown exactly how that game's going to play out.
Yep.
Absolutely. One more thing we'll touch on here, is Oregon going to move up in the rankings? At this point, I don't know. I could see him staying pretty stagnant. I think the top 10 sit pretty tight.
Well, they'll move at least one spot because Notre Dame, Ohio State. Yeah, one of those teams is dropping.
There you go. So we probably got one spot. And like you said, Tony, I see you acknowledged in the comments too. It's not like the rankings really matter at this point in the year. There's just so much ambiguity going on right now. There's going to be teams that lose games they have no business losing, and I'm sure there's going to be a team who has a very highly competitive game and just blows somebody out of the water, and we're going to look at them and say, oh man, they're for real. But at this point, I'm happy where we're at. We're up to 9. If we can even squeak up another spot to 8, that's great. I don't think that really changes the mentality of anything. I think Dan's. I don't think
Jason said it well. Rankings this time of year don't really mean a lot.
That's what I'm saying.
As long as you keep winning.
I agree. It's just like the people who get bent out of shape about the preseason polls. I don't care if Oregon's not ranked, because I know damn well the final polls are going to look absolutely nothing like that initial poll is. Just like the final poll is probably going to look nothing like the poll looks like this week. So it's fun, though. Right. Obviously, I want to see a lower number, lower speaking, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in front of Oregon. But, it is what it is. I think, if they keep doing their jobs, if they're able to beat a Washington, if they're able to beat the Utahs of the world, the UWs, man, it's hard to deny them. They're going to be right up there at the end of the year. But, Spaz, that is everything I have on my list tonight. Before we head out here, guys, I've had a really great time talking with y'all tonight. A lot of interactions in the comments tonight. Just know that's what makes it fun for us, for Spaz and I. It's great interacting with you guys, whether people trolls, whether they're Duck fans, whether they're fans of whoever. Really enjoy you guys being here. So thanks for interacting with us throughout the night. I do want to encourage you to tune in on Tuesday night, where we will have the all-new Oregon Ducks live. We'll be previewing the Stanford game, probably refreshing this Colorado dub a little bit. But yeah, be sure to come in, check us out on Tuesday night. I believe that is 7 p.m. Pacific time. And, come hang out with us, have fun with us. But Spaz, if you don't have anything else, looks like probably not. All right, Duck fans.
I'm good.
All right, Duck fans. Well, I just one more time wanted to say thank you to everybody for tuning in. I hope you all have a great night. Go enjoy the rest of this fresh victory feeling. I know there's some great football on the rest of the night. So everybody have a good one. Thanks for tuning in, guys.